The dollar's in a lot of trouble now, right? I mean, because see, before, if you have the petrodollar idea, that means that people have to buy US dollars first in order to buy oil. Well, if they don't have to do that, then that means the dollar is in a lot of trouble. Now, you can enforce this, and this is a serious conversation, by the way, and I'm glad to see other people are talking about it now. People have been talking about this for a while. So, I mean, it's coming up now more and more. And it works fine as long as you have the force to go out there and crush all your enemies, see them driven before you, and hear the limitations of the women. Then yeah, the petrodollar works just fine. But what happens when you don't have that ability any longer? What happens when you see that most of your people in your country are seeing this going, dude, hold on, this doesn't really benefit us. And it really doesn't. It benefits a handful of big oil companies. It benefits it benefits government. That's all it does. It benefits big tech oligarchs, building their data centers and shit like that. Those are the only people that really benefit by any of this. The average American has really not benefited all that much by this. The average American has benefited by, drill here, drill now, and, have a bunch of wildcats do it. That's a term, for those of you who don't know, that's a term for small oil companies, little guys that have like 2 or 3 wells, right? It's just guys who know how to drill oil wells and then pump oil out and sell it. That's it. And, to a refinery. And then the refineries, of course, if you have your local refineries, they refine it into gasoline or diesel or kerosene, whatever, all the different stuff that you get out of oil, which you get a lot of products out of oil. Americans are benefited by that kind of stuff. But of course, then American companies, small businesses would have to hire Americans, and they have to pay them enough money to keep them interested to go out there and do all of that. Everything from drill oil to refine it to haul it around and all that kind of stuff. And again, that applies to every other product out there. And we don't want to do that now, do we? Because Americans are kind of expensive. Because of course, Americans want to live in America. People are shocked, right? It's not because they don't have anywhere else to go, right? Then it's not like Americans can just pack up and go to some other country and just set up shop there. That would be called colonialism, right? So yeah, Americans kind of have to deal with the hand that they're dealt here, and which is a really good, solid hand. It is. I mean, agriculturally, the U.S. is blessed beyond the wildest dreams of many other countries that are out there. We are agriculturally insanely blessed. We do have tons of oil. We've got lots of oil, especially with a declining population. The U.S. isn't supposed to be flooding the country with 50 million illegals and then 50 million visas. You're not supposed to do that. No, you kick all those people out, and you do that by just I would just devalue the petrodollar to nothing, just from the bottom up. Send everybody $10 million and call it good. Let the dollars blow around like leaves in the wind because nobody wants them anymore. Full-on Zimbabwe style. And then let Americans figure it out. And of course, most of the people that are just here for the money, they're all going to leave. If they're just here for the money because the USD happens to have more spending power in their home country, they're going to leave. Why would they stay here? Right? They would take off. I would. If I were just, put yourself in this position, Americans, put yourself in this position. If you went to another country and with the idea that they were going to pay you in a currency that was worth more than the USD, and so you were working there and you were making the equivalent of, 10 times the amount of money you could make in the States, you'd go do it. And of course, when you were over there, you really wouldn't care what that country, you wouldn't care about their politics. You wouldn't care about anything about, you wouldn't care about the problems they're having. You don't care about their culture. What do you care about that? It's not your problem, is it? That's how a lot of people see it when they come to the U.S. They're just here for the money. There's videos on it. There's videos, not from Americans, but from foreigners that do videos that are saying, we're just here for the money. And as soon as the money is gone, we're out of here. We're not going to stick around and do anything. Yeah, why would they want to stick around and clean up the mess they created, right? So the only people who would want to stay would be the people who actually want to assimilate and become Americans and actually go and do American stuff, such as build the country, settle it, and so on, and actually have a real economy. God willing, right? So, yeah, I mean, I'm glad to see more people are talking about this, but yeah, the petrodollar's in a lot of trouble, and it should be. This has been a long time in coming, and so, well, what's the next step? And I mentioned this yesterday in a podcast that I was on, but I will just touch on it here just briefly. There are 2 ways to handle this. Right now, it's being handled the worst possible way that could ever be handled, which is just print a bunch of money, create a bunch of inflation at the top, and then let all of that inflation flood down to everybody else, to where all the poor and the middle class and the working class, the people that are trying to keep body and soul together, they're dealing with ridiculous inflation, high gas prices, and so on. In the meantime, the uber rich are getting uber richer, if there is such a thing. I mean, like, at a certain point, it's just becomes stupid to even say these numbers because they really are meaningless in the day-to-day sense. So, yeah, and then they just build their pet projects like data centers and bullshit like that. Stuff that there really isn't an actual market for it, right? I mean, there isn't an actual market for any of that stuff. So, yeah, that's what they do. And then, of course, all this stuff requires subsidy. All that stuff will go away, by the way. There isn't really a whole lot of net benefit for Americans on this. Again, especially when you're talking about the average American is trying to own a house, they're trying to buy groceries, they're trying to teach their kids decent values. I hope you're doing that. Yeah, so there's that to consider. So that's the first way. The second way would be the appropriate way, at least in my opinion, given the circumstances in which we find ourselves, would be to inflate the currency from the bottom up, not the top down, and let all of the debt go away. Let all of the dollar-denominated debt basically get paid off, and the banks get flooded with a bunch of worthless paper, which is all it is anyway. And there we go. And then Americans, the people who are here, of course, the valuation, most of the people leave, the illegals leave, most of the visas will take off, and they'll go back to scamming some other country. And then Americans are left having to deal with, what do we do now? What do we do now? Indeed. It means that you need to come up with another way to pay people for their time. Left, right, or center, I don't really care, dude. I mean, the reality is time isn't free. I don't care what your politics are. Time isn't free, right? You know it, I know it, everybody knows it. We can do it out of charity and goodwill. I'll help my neighbor with something, or I'll help my other neighbor with something, and I'll do it. I don't want any money or anything like that. I do it just to be a good neighbor and try and be a good citizen. And many people will do stuff like that. But when you're talking about an overall industrialization of something like that, no, you're going to have to pay people for their time. That's reality. And especially when you got to figure that the people who do all of the work are the ones who are going to... The people who do the work that you either don't want to do or can't do, respectively, they have to be paid enough to justify showing up and doing the work. That's why they try to, and right now, there's this thing about trying to keep everything from being permanent. You don't want to make cars that last a long time. You don't want to make cars that people want to keep. You want to just keep making garbage cars that people just the disposable society. Because, yeah, it keeps people busy. As opposed to saying, okay, well, hey, I got the car situation taken care of, and it's made out of the best materials possible, and it should last me forever, and I can fix it myself, with a screwdriver and a hammer. And there we go. That would be the way you want to do something like that. And then, because then your civilization could advance. You advance very quickly when you have that. When people don't have to keep constantly working to buy the same shit over and over and over and over and over and over and over, they tend to advance into other things. They tend to move out of adolescence into adulthood and start saying, okay, now let's think about the actual future. Now that we've got some of this stuff, some of the foundational stuff taken care of. I've gone on too long.